Hello and welcome to the Firmly Founded Teen Podcast, where teens get tips and coaching on how to feel more in control of their lives. Because while the teenage years may be unstable and awkward, you don't have to be. I'm your host, Joey Massio, certified life coach and teacher for teens and young adults. Now, before we get into today's episode, it's review time. Today's review comes from KHops310. She said, I love podcasts on life coaching. I really like the style of this podcast with good analogies and examples that teens relate to. Great tips for life and how to change your thinking. Appreciate this podcast for getting started as my teens are starting into their teen years. Thank you, K-Hops. You're awesome. I hope your teens find this podcast useful and fun for years to come. So, K-Hops has now entered into the contest to win a $50, a $100, or a $150 gift card to Amazon. If you want to be entered, then leave me a review on iTunes with your Instagram handle. If you don't have Instagram, just leave your parents' Instagram handle or have them leave their Instagram handle, or take a screenshot of your review and email it to me at firmlyfoundedcoaching@gmail.com. Now, the contest ends April 15th, 2020. All right, enough of that. Let's get into the episode. We all love a good enemy in a story, don't we? We just love to hate them. I think of Malfoy in Harry Potter. What a jerk, huh? Darth Vader in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker's big bad voodoo daddy. Iconic, much better than the Kylo Ren in these last movies, am I right? And Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games has so many enemies. President Snow, the dictator, the game maker dude with the swirly beard, and all those rotten tributes from those rich districts. Sons of motherless goats, all of them. But they make for a great story. There are enemies in your story as well. You're probably thinking, oh yeah, I know of a few snobby tributes at school who are trying to metaphorically kill me. But I'll let you in on a secret. In our lives, like in a story, all enemies are fabricated, made up. They're not real. Now, if you have an enemy, you're probably screaming at me on the inside right now, and maybe even a little bit on the outside. But follow me for a bit. In a story or movie, the enemy's sole purpose is to try the hero's weakness. They either embody the opposite of the hero's flaw, or they're someone designed to highlight the hero's flaw. For example, before Hogwarts, Harry struggled with being unimportant and looked over. He spent the first 11 years of his life being a nobody. Then he finds out not only is he a wizard, but he is the most famous wizard there ever was. Awesome, right? Now he can forever leave behind the thoughts that he deserves to be living in a closet under the stairs, right? Nope. Enter Malfoy. Malfoy seems to always want to tell Harry how unimportant he is, even though everyone and their mother knows who he is. Harry could easily just sit back and ignore Malfoy and let his sniveling little comments unveil his jealousy. However, that is not Malfoy's purpose in the story. Antagonists are not created to show us that there are enemies outside of us that we should be aware of, but that there are enemies within us that we need to defeat. The same is true for Luke and his feelings of not being good enough. Vader is there to challenge him with just not becoming just good enough, but the possibility that he might become bad enough. Join me on the dark side. And before she is pulled into the Hunger Games, Katniss feels trapped in a life of just trying to stay alive. Then she's thrown into an arena which she is literally trapped in as she tries to stay alive. The point? In real life, enemies don't give us new challenges, trials, or thoughts to bring us down. They only highlight the challenges, trials, or thoughts we are already struggling with. That's why we pick them as our enemies. That's right, we pick our enemies. We create them. Now, your brain is still fighting me on this. I can sense it. Let's say this. You are someone who struggles with self-image. You're smart, with straight A's, top of your class, have won multiple academic awards, but you think you look ugly, and you hate it. A new student comes to school and meets you for the first time. They look at you, and the first thing they say is, "Boy, you are dumb." That's laughable. You don't become offended, you become confused. And you're probably thinking something along the lines of, wow, they just don't know me at all. And if after you point out your amazing academic record, this new student still continues to think you're an idiot, dumber than a bag of hammers, and advertises to anyone who will listen that you're an imbecile, you're probably not going to be bothered by it because you're thinking something along the lines of they must have been dropped on their head as a child because they can't count to 4.0, which is my GPA. Now, do they become your enemy? No. At worst, they become an annoyance. But what if a new student comes to school and says, "You're ugly"? Now they start moving into enemy territory because they've hit on what you already see as your perceived weakness. So your enemy is your enemy because you make them so by the way you think about yourself. Think of it this way. You become friends with people who share the same good thoughts you have about you. You become enemies with people who share the same bad thoughts you have about you. So if you want to make lots of enemies, you need to have lots of bad thoughts about yourself. But if you want to get rid of enemies, you need to get rid of the bad thoughts about yourself. Sounds simple, but the hard part is that many of us think the negative thoughts we have about ourselves are just fact. I am ugly, or I am dumb, or I am awkward. How can I not think that? I'll challenge you on the negative thoughts you have about yourself at another time, but I'll just say here that there is always a way not to think that. But if you have to think it, and you must, then I would have you add on one little helpful bit. And that's okay. I'm ugly, and that's okay. I'm dumb, and that's okay. I'm awkward, and that's okay. It's possible, and it's so freeing. And those aren't just random thoughts I made up. Those are thoughts I have about myself often. What makes a thought about yourself negative is thinking that it shouldn't be. You want to know how to make enemies? Don't accept yourself for who you are. If you don't accept yourself for who you are, then you will find enemies anywhere you go because there will always be people who are willing to agree with you on things about you that, quote unquote, shouldn't be. And we love to hate them because they justify the way we see ourselves. And this enemy doesn't have to be a person. It can be your least favorite subject at school that is agreeing with you that you're not good at math and you should be. It can be a sport or a talent that is concurring with your beliefs that you're not good enough and you ought to be. It can even at times be your faith that seems to be echoing your sentiments about not being where you should be spiritually. But enemies only exist if we make them. And we make them by believing unhelpful things about ourselves. You see, in fiction, enemies serve a purpose. How boring would it be if Harry didn't doubt that he was going to save the wizarding world? Or if Luke knew he was going to become one of the greatest Jedis ever? Or if Katniss had an absolute surety that she would survive the Hunger Games? Their doubtful and negative thoughts about themselves made their enemies possible and the story entertaining. In fiction, it's much more exciting and enjoyable to have enemies. But in real life, it is much more exciting and enjoyable not to have enemies. Our enemies, like negative thoughts about ourselves, don't really serve a purpose. So, get rid of them. I'm Joey Mascio. Thank you for tuning in. If you are a teen and you found this episode helpful and want to really apply this in your life and you want help applying it in your life, then send your parents to my website, firmlyfounded.com, and have them sign you up for a free coaching session where I personally help you take these awesome tools and install them into your life. It'll be the best thing you've ever done, especially if you're someone who has a lot of enemies to unload. See you next time.